What? Did not see that one coming at all. Friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. Today's video is going to be a reading vlog for House of Sky and Breath, the latest Sarah J Maas book in the Crescent City series. It just came out today. I got my Audible pre-order. Annoyingly, my physical pre-order is apparently back-ordered, even though I pre-ordered it in October. Thank you, Target. But it's okay, we're gonna start the audiobook. So I have a busy day today, but I'm gonna start the audio and check in with y'all because I hear this book is a whirlwind, so we'll see. Warning now, this will be a spoilery video, so if you have not read the book, go read it and then come back and watch. Unless you don't plan on reading it and you don't care, then feel free to stay. It is morning, as you can probably tell. You know, I just finished my coffee and I'm getting ready for my day, just wrote a book review. Also, today I can't read all day because I have to film my mid-month wrap-up. I am on a live stream tonight talking Squeakcore on Jess's channel, and before that I need to listen to a podcast episode and make notes to prepare for it. So those things have to happen today. And then I have to pick up my kids from their after-school activities around 5. So we'll see how much of this audiobook I can get through. So I'll kind of take you with my day. I suspect, because like her books, I just like eat them up like candy. I know they're not everyone's cup of tea, but I just reread Crescent City. I loved it. And we're doing a podcast episode, me and Izzy, on the series so far once we've both read this, so I do need to read it sooner rather than later. So I'm downloading my audiobook. We're gonna start it. But first, let's do a couple of predictions before I get started. I hope that Hunt is endgame. I think he will be, but I think that she's gonna bring back Connor in book 2, because we ended, and I had kind of forgotten this because it was such a whirlwind the first time I read it, but when I did my reread of House of Earth and Blood, I noticed at the end that we see at the end of the book the shadows of not Danica, but her other people, her pack that died, across the river. And so I think that they're going to bring them back and Connor is going to be in play again. Bryce is going to have to make a choice because he was always who she was supposed to end up with. Like, she thought that they were going to have a relationship and they never had a chance to get it started before he died. So I think that he is going to be the kind of intermediate person while Hunt maybe makes some bad choices. But I hope Hunt is endgame because I love Hunt a lot. I really like them together. So we'll see. That's kind of my theory as to what's going to happen romantically. I'm also really interested to see if she is going to more obviously connect this series with her other series. There is enough in them that we know that all of the series she's written exist in the same universe, but we don't know a lot of specifics yet. We just have gotten like Easter eggs connecting Crescent City with like ACOTAR and Throne of Glass. So I'm really curious to see if we're gonna get more of that. I have a theory about how Amren might be connected to the Crescent City series. I've heard another argument for how she might be connected in a different way, which is interesting. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but one of my friends and patrons, Isabella from the Feminist Bookworm on Instagram, she thinks that maybe Fury, who's Bryce's sort of assassin friend, might actually be Amren from the ACOTAR series, because she like crosses dimensions and does things and is kind of mysterious, which I'm like, okay, maybe that would be interesting. What I've been wondering though is because we know that Amren has this like human body in ACOTAR, but is actually this kind of like vast, powerful, unknowable being. I'm kind of wondering if the empty throne in this series belongs to Amren, who somehow got trapped in another realm. Who really knows? I don't know what Sarah's gonna do with these books, but I have theories and ideas and I'm very curious to see what's gonna happen because I'm pretty sure in some way she's going to connect these worlds. So I'm going to download my audiobook to my phone and start listening, and I will check back in with you guys as I get through it. I'm excited. Okay, I just listened to the prologue and I had to like rewind it a couple of times to catch everything. It's interesting. Let's talk about it. Thoughts. Okay, so the prologue introduces us to a new character who we didn't know before. Her name is Sophie and she is part human, part Thunderbird. Put a pin in that. We're going to talk about it again later. And she is working for the human resistance, Pippa is another character we're introduced to in the prologue, who is the commander of the most elite fighting unit of the human resistance. Sophie is on a mission to get intel, but secretly is trying to free her brother from a prison camp where she found out that he was. Okay, so she does this. Some things happen in the prologue. So a few thoughts here. Number one, it's interesting we're focusing more on the human resistance in book 2. We knew from book 1 that humans were being marginalized and oppressed, and that was clearly an issue. Bryce is half human, half elf, and so, you know, like, we see a little bit of that with her human mother and stepfather in book 1, but it is appearing that book 2 is going to really dive a lot more into this issue of the mistreatment of humans and the resistance. Now, I said put a pin in that Thunderbird thing because it's an interesting choice, and I think people are going to have very mixed responses to it. I could see some readers being upset about the choice to use this. One thing you should know about this series, if you don't already, is that it is a mishmash of mythologies from different cultures around the world that she's kind of mashed together into this, you know, city that she's created. Now, the Thunderbird mythology is from Native American and First Nations indigenous people in North America. And the subtext seems to be that Sophie and her brother are secretly descended from this bloodline. I'm assuming they're intended to be stand-ins for indigenous people. It is definitely drawing on that specific mythology. In the mythology, Thunderbirds had the ability to control lightning and thunderbolts, and in the book, people with Thunderbird blood have the ability to use electricity and first light, which is another power source in this universe. What the book also tells us about Thunderbirds is that they have mostly been hunted and killed off, which, again, I'm guessing is a stand-in for the genocide of indigenous peoples in North America. I think it's interesting. I feel like the intention here is probably good. Whether indigenous people are going to read this and feel like it's actually a good representation or an appropriation of their culture and mythology, you know, I mean, likely we're gonna see this go both ways. I feel like the intention here might be to try to bring in indigenous characters and bring in that mythology because, you know, we know historically Sarah J Maas has been slowly working on diversifying the types of characters that she is portraying. Two mixed responses. So yeah, it's interesting that the prologue is opening with this character named Sophie, who I'm guessing is intended to be like part indigenous. We don't have a character description for her yet, really, so I don't know what she's going to look like or how that's going to be handled. I don't know if she's going to continue to be a perspective character in the book or if it's just for the prologue or how this is going to be used. We'll see. I'll kind of check back in. But it's definitely a choice, and one that I'm imagining some readers are going to not like just because she is a white woman using this in her books. I'm very, very curious to hear what the discourse on this is. I don't feel like I know enough at this point to have a clear feeling personally on what to think about it, but I hope that she's been careful in how she did this. And I don't know if there is a good way to do it or not. I feel like there are people who think that you just should not use indigenous mythology, period, unless you're indigenous yourself, which is valid. So let me know in the comments down below your thoughts. It's interesting. Anyway, I'm gonna keep reading. I need to actually like get myself ready for the day, but the prologue, because it was introducing completely new characters, completely new things, I had to just stop and just listen. I wish I had my physical book. I'm so tempted to go to Barnes & Noble and buy a second copy, but I don't need 2 copies of this book. Why, Target? Why are you freaking back ordering this book that I pre-ordered in October? But yeah, it would be very useful to have a physical book to read along with. We'll see. We'll see what I decide to do. You'll see. All right, check back in later. I'm dressed. I still need to do my makeup so I can actually film, but I've been kind of riveted to this book, so let's do an update. I have read the first 4 chapters so far. This has been mostly Bryce and Hunt, a little bit of Bryce's brother, including a scene of him going down on a cute fawn, so heads up. Nobody should probably be surprised. I think the sexy times are going to leap up in book 2. We didn't get much in book 1, but book 2, it's looking like we're gonna get a lot more of that with multiple characters. Meanwhile, Bryce and Hunt have made a chastity pact until winter solstice, so that's going really well for them. The first scene, they're going to the ballet to see Juniper perform, and it's definitely interesting because Bryce now has this star on her chest that sometimes she can't control when will light up brilliantly with the light magic that she now has as a Fae, and we're quickly running into some problems, right? Because now that she is officially recognized as Fae and people know who her father is, that means that she has less control of her life because she is an unmarried Fae female. I don't remember from book one how much we got about this in terms of Fae women having little control of their lives, but that definitely seems to be going full force here because, unbeknownst to her, her father has picked a fiance for her and he shows up at an after party and he's kind of a jerk. His name is Cormac. In the audiobook, he's got kind of a Scottish accent and is, yeah, definitely a jerk, determined to marry Bryce for her power. So that's interesting. I definitely didn't see that coming, an arranged marriage issue coming between her and Hunt, because they're together even with the the chastity pact they have going. There are also some quite cheesy lines like Hunt saying, "Hey, you want to go home and count my abs?" I'm like, oh my god, that's so dumb. But okay, I guess that constitutes flirting in this world, it's fine. Things are about to get messy. She apparently feels like she needs to let the betrothal stand for now. It's a little unclear why. I guess because they're supposed to lay low, but is that going to happen? Was it ever going to happen that they could actually lay low for very long? Probably not. Also, new archangels have been assigned to Crescent City and somewhere else. I'm a little unclear on the geography here, but they are not people who are known for being particularly strong or brutal, so questions about what's going to happen with them beginning rule, the war against the humans, I don't know, there's a lot of open questions, so we'll see. Okay, I am up to chapter 13, and I feel like now is a good time to check in because there have been a couple of relatively big things being talked about. One thing I want to note just structurally is that this book is also kind of getting set up to be a sort of mystery plot, which I really like. I think the House of Earth and Blood book did that as a murder mystery of who killed Danica and the pack, whereas this one is more kind of this mystery of who is Sophie and her brother? Where are they? If they survived, what happened to them? And I don't think that most of her books have been set up that way, where this mystery plot is what's kind of driving the action. And I like it. I think it works. So, plot twist. I was expecting that maybe they would bring Connor back from the dead. I don't think now that I'm correct about that, but instead what they're doing is apparently setting up his younger brother, Ethan, as a potential love interest. So Ethan finally stood up for Bryce, got kicked out of his pack, and is staying at Bryce's home. Sometimes in her bed, supposedly platonically, but we just learned from Fury that maybe Ethan always had a thing for Bryce. She doesn't totally believe it yet, but there's something there. So basically, I think I was in the ballpark of what she was doing. I just didn't get the details right, so I don't think we're bringing anyone back from the dead, at least at this point, but who knows, it's a Sarah J Maas book. Honestly, anything could happen, but it does seem like it's setting up this messy thing where we have a love quadrangle, sort of, because Bryce is supposed to be engaged to this one dude. We've got Hunt, and then we've got Ethan. And also, can we talk about the fact that it's Ethan and Hunt? Ethan Hunt, was that intentional? Maybe. It's kind of funny. So Therion's plotline is kind of interesting. He's a merman, which is fun, and apparently his sister was killed, and so because of that he wants to protect people. He is the one who finds out information about the fact that Sophie and her brother maybe actually survived, and now everybody's trying to track them down. And then there was a connection with Danica, where Danica and Sophie had exchanged emails, so all of these questions about Danica still, as far as was she secretly a sympathizer for the human rebellion or was she not? And then in chapter 13, Bryce and Fury hang out and Fury tells her that Danica was what's called a bloodhound, which means that she could sniff out people's bloodlines. It was a rare magical ability that she tried to keep hidden because people would try to use her for it. But she could tell by scent who people were. And it's interesting because the reason Fury knows is that when they met, when Danica and Fury met, she could tell something, we don't know what, but something dangerous, a dangerous secret about her through the scent. So I like, does this add to the idea that what if Fury is Amryn? Maybe, I don't know specifically. Also, I do have to say, I'm loving the adorableness of Juniper and Fury in their girlfriend relationship. It's cute. I like seeing that Sarah J Maas has moved away from being so heteronormative in all of her relationship pairings. It's a good change. So I am intensely into this. It's moving at a fast pace. A lot is happening. I don't know where it's going. We'll see. I'll check back in later. Oh my god. Okay, chapter 15. What? Like, oh geez. Okay. So chapter 15. What did I do? What did we just learn? Number one, Bryce's powers involve light and shadows, which I guess we kind of knew, but clearly there's a lot more to her power than what we've seen so far. She's being told that she needs to develop it and practice because there's more than what she sees. Also, we get confirmation that this world seems to be a future version of our Earth. Like, that's what I think. It's been called Midgard before, which is the Norse mythological word for Earth. And now this demon prince cat is asking Bryce, did you ever think about, like, if you know it used to be the humans and their gods, where did the Asteri come from? Where did the angels and the demons and the shifters come from? And she says, well, like, we're at war with hell. And he's like, are you though? So what is hell really? Like, and like, there's a lot of questions. And then we find out that Cormac, her betrothed, is actually somebody we've seen before, the right-hand man of Pippa. He is a human rebel, but he's Fey. What? Okay, so that's like a big revelation. So clearly there's more to Cormac than meets the eye. There's more that we don't know. Yeah. What? This is interesting. I'm not super surprised that this is supposed to be human Earth, but this definitely confirms it. And so it's asking questions of like, where did the Asteri come from and who are they? And it seems likely that a lot of these beings came from other worlds, like where we had the ACOTAR series and where we had the Throne of Glass series, because we know that those exist as like parallel universes. What? Anyway, I'm enjoying it. It's a trip. 21 chapters in, and the Asteri maybe aren't what they say they are, which is stars or gods with the power of stars, but like Danica was apparently investigating them, and there are questions. Also, one of the like the Prince of the Pit, one of the demon people pulled Hunt into a pocket universe. Wild. Okay, I've gotten through the first 26 chapters. This will probably be my final update for today because I'm about to go on a live stream on Jess Owen's channel talking about Squeakcore. But yeah, one thing that is interesting is they talk about this prophecy that like when the sword and the knife are brought back together, reunited or something, or people will as well. And then it seems to hint that maybe the Fae from another world, whatever world they came from, which I'm assuming is one from one of the other series, will be reunited. Wasn't there a knife in the ACOTAR series in Court of Silver Flames? I'm really bad at remembering these kinds of details, so I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research and look into it, but I feel like there was something like that, so maybe it's like a knife from that world being reunited with like the light sword, whatever thing it is that Bryce has. I don't know. Also, interesting thing, because the sword came from a different universe, which is why it can kill the Reapers, which we saw, and nobody knew that. And then there's, what is it? Dawnstar, Brightstar or something. This person who is a spy with access to the Asteri. Who is she? I don't know. Maybe it's the queen that Rue was supposed to marry? Or maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. Lots of questions. I will say, you know, somebody had mentioned this to me and I'm like, yeah, I think that's true. We're getting a lot of stuff in the court of the sea queen, the river queen, and those parts are like moderately interesting. I'm not sure how they really add to the overall plot, and I feel like there's kind of a lot of it given what else is going on. Those are probably maybe the least interesting parts. I mean, is it because she just wants Therion as a perspective character? Possibly, but they're definitely not as compelling as the other ones. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say so far. I do really wish I had a physical copy to read along with because I feel like I'm missing details. Like, I'm sure I'm missing nuance and details because there's just so much happening. So I feel like once I have a physical copy, I'm probably going to want to flip back through and like reread sections to see what I'm missing. But I mean, I'm enjoying the journey. So check back in probably tomorrow. Hello, I've read the first 37 chapters. It's the next day. I wanted to check in. I have been making notes on my phone as things happen because there's a lot going on, but I have to leave soon to go get my kids from school, so I thought I should check in with y'all. Okay. So one thing that's kind of interesting, we don't know much about it yet, but there's mention of mech suits that the Astari are trying to have invented and send to their military, so that's interesting. We're getting like a sci-fi twist. Sarah J Maas writing about mech suits, like who would have thought? Interesting, curious to see where that goes. We also know, I think I mentioned Daybright, or Day as she ends up becoming called later in the story, is this agent who's high placed, and I have questions about who she might be. I don't really know. We know that she's old. We know that she's high placed. She has access to the Astari, and I don't know, like, could she maybe be one of the archangels or like somebody surprising? Maybe like the hind, or I don't know. I don't know who Day is gonna be, but I feel like that's gonna end up being a big twist. We'll see. One thing is, I was talking to Isabella a little bit about my reading. I mentioned her earlier, and she was talking about how she realized that Cormac's ability to basically teleport is sort of like winnowing, and so it seems that perhaps Crescent City is intended to be connected to Akatar, that maybe the Fey and angels from this world come from the Akatar world. Still an open question. We don't know a lot about that yet, but it's interesting. And then we have this open question of whether Bryce and Hunt are mates. It seems possible. There's some conversation about it, and there is a steamy scene between the two of them. There's been a couple since the last time I mentioned it, but we've had oral scenes for him and for her, but on the one for her, something happened and something changed. And after that fact, we even have her brother saying that she smells different. And so I'm wondering if maybe it's the beginning of a mating bond, kind of like what we've seen in Akatar, which could be interesting because we have gotten confirmation that Ethan definitely had a thing for Bryce and felt guilty about it when his brother died because he had always had a thing for her. But he seems to be letting go of that and giving it up. So I don't know that we're going to go that direction with the romance, which I'm not mad about. I like Hunt and Bryce. I'm happy to keep them together. I would rather have external forces pull them apart, maybe, where they have to get back to each other instead of having it be like a love triangle. I think I would prefer that. So we'll see. But yeah, possible mating bond. Very interesting. We've also learned a lot more about the Underking, and he apparently comes from a place between the stars and feeds on the souls of the dead, and is, you know, a more complicated figure than just a death god. He seems to be a being from another realm who is powerful and feeds on life energy. Like, interesting revelations. We also found out who Danica's real father is, her biological father, and his name is Mordok. He is one of the Dread Wolves. He's second in command to the Hind. He's a bloodhound, so that's where her bloodhound abilities came from. How that happened, we don't know. That's kind of like a big thing. Why did she not want to tell Bryce about it? Bryce obviously feels hurt that Danica never told her. One thing that I think is so interesting about this series is that Danica dies in the first few chapters of book one, and yet she is one of the most important characters in this series. And I think it's a really interesting choice to have somebody who is no longer living have such a strong presence throughout a series. And in some ways, it's kind of cool if you think about this idea of people staying with us even after they pass, of thinking about grief. Part of me wonders if she's going to do a thing that brings Danica back, but I don't know how that would happen because her soul kind of went off. So I don't think that's the case, but it's definitely interesting to have Danica play such a significant role throughout the series. We also get some more interesting things about Hunt and Bryce's magic, where they are more powerful and able to do more things than they realized. Hunt figures out that he's able to channel energy from the gates. He does this from the Dead Gate, and then that energy gets channeled into Bryce and her sword, and she uses it, and it doesn't hurt her. So they are a serious power couple. I do like this thing of them working together as a team, fighting as a team, using magic as a team. I like that. I think it's fun. And I like this trend of starting to have heroines who don't need protection in the same ways as some of her earlier heroines. I feel like we're seeing a shift in that a bit. Sorry I keep moving around. It's because like my hand gets tired holding the camera in one place. I need to just get one of the, like put it on one of my stick things, but I don't have time. So yeah, I am enjoying it. I will say this feels much more fast-paced in many ways than book 1 did, but I actually think I so far like book 1 better than book 2. I think it has more cozy human moments than book 2 does. And I wouldn't be shocked if there are people who criticized her for including some of those things in book 1. There are still some, but not as much as I would like. Like, it's a lot about the action and the plot. And there are some really interesting revelations that we're getting. Again, I would say that Therion scenes are probably the least interesting. It's hard for me to see where they're going or why they matter all that much, although I'm sure in some way they will. But that's kind of where I'm at with the book, so I will keep reading and I will check back in. Hello, it is another day, and I wanted to do an update. I'm probably going to finish the book today, but I've read the first 46 chapters, and I wanted to check in with you guys. I need to like get myself together for this day, but okay, I have notes. I've been taking notes because like, God, there's a lot happening in this book. So first of all, we're introduced to these mystics, right? There are these 3 people, 2 women, 1 man, who are kept like submerged and are able to like see things with their minds. They have these like abilities. Okay, so the whole description of that scene and setup is exactly like Minority Report, this movie with Tom Cruise from back in the day, where there's like 3 oracles who are kept in a tank, very, very similar to this, and he ends up rescuing one of them. It's a great sci-fi movie if you haven't seen it, like Tom Cruise messiness. But yeah, it was kind of weird reading the scene because I was like, this sounds exactly like Minority Report except with more magic. So that was kind of interesting. So one of the things we end up learning is that one of the mystics is actually a wolf, and a suppressed alpha at that, who was sold at age 4 by her family to become a mystic. And so this raises some questions about who she is and who she's the daughter of. Is it possible she could be Danica's sister or cousin? I mean, because we know that Danica was kind of an alpha before she died, so maybe this wolf is related to that family. Who are her parents? Why was she sold? What are they trying to hide? I feel like there's a lot of open questions there we don't have answers to. And then we're learning a little bit more about Day or Daybright. So we know that most likely she is in the House of Sky and Breath, okay? Rune makes a joke about it. Based on her response, it seems reasonable to assume that she's House of Sky and Breath, which means she would be a Fey, an angel, or a sylph, which I had kind of thought maybe she was an angel anyway, because that would give her access to the Astari. I'm wondering if it's Celestina, who I think is the new leader of the angels or whatever, or the Astari representative, because there's this weird thing where out of nowhere she's pulled out of the vision or wherever that is they're meeting with Rune, and like he can sense that like somebody, like she's having like rough sex that maybe she didn't want so much with somebody. We know that is engaged to another angel because the Astari are forcing it, and he was there visiting her, so maybe it's Celestina. So that's interesting. I also think this sets up a potential future love triangle if it is, because we have Rune and then Hypaxia, who he's betrothed to, but she hasn't shown up at all in this book, even though they kind of connected before he knew who she was, when she would just seem like a regular med witch in book 1. So there's some messiness there. I also want to say that the more we see of Fury on the page, the more likely I think it is that she might actually be Amren. I think that would make a lot of sense, actually, and that would be a really interesting crossover, because there's also so much evidence that this is going to be crossing over with the Court of Thorns and Roses series, that the Fae and the angels from this world are related. And I'm thinking maybe the angels are just like high Fae, right? Because high Fae in the ACOTAR series have the wings and the others don't. So I feel like in the human world, it would make sense that beings with wings would be viewed as angels, even though maybe they're not. So like there's a lot of moving pieces here, right? There's a lot happening, a lot of questions, a lot of interesting potential connections to other books. I do think it wouldn't be shocking if we find out that Fury is actually Amren. Here is a picture of Fury. Here is a picture of Amren. I mean, like, it seems very feasible, right? Like, very feasible. Okay, in chapter 4, we find out that Bryce and Hunt are true mates in the Fey sense of the word. Their scents have merged, and it seems likely that this is quite similar to the mating bond that we know from the ACOTAR series. And also this would say that Bryce and Hunt are in fact endgame, and Ethan was sort of just like a red herring to throw in some distraction before we got them together, which I'm glad that they're endgame. I feel like they should be together. I'm a little surprised that we're having a pairing where she didn't go farther in maybe splitting them up or bringing in another love interest. I feel like she's doing more interesting things and just adding more characters. So that to me signals growth as a writer. She's doing things that aren't just cookie cutter from what she's done in the past. We also get hints that whatever is happening is taking place 15,000 years from our present, based on the aging of some of the ruins underwater that they found, like human ruins from the past. 15,000 years is really far in the future, so that's interesting. I don't know if that's just like arbitrary because it seems really far, or if it's like for a specific reason, but kind of an interesting tidbit. And then in chapter 46, we finally get Bryce and Hunt having full-on sex, and they then accidentally end up teleporting because their powers are combined. And this to me reads kind of similarly to the cementing of the mating bond in the ACOTAR series. I feel like that's kind of what's going on here. It's interesting. Like, I feel like more and more things make it clear that it's probably tied to that world. We find out that dragon shifters exist, so that's fun. We have a woman who's a dragon shifter who is imprisoned and has now been freed. And then at the very end of the chapter I just finished, we find out that Sophie from the prologue has in fact drowned and didn't survive, although her brother is still apparently alive somewhere. A lot of things happening, right? A lot of interesting connections. I do feel like, though, this book is such a whirlwind. I kind of wish it took its time a little bit more, the way that her books often do and the way that I feel like book 1 did, of allowing time for these characters to breathe a bit more and hang out with each other. Although I know there are readers who don't like that and don't like how much of that she does. And there is a little bit of it, but it does feel like a whirlwind. So a lot is happening. There's a lot of revelations. There's a lot of interesting tidbits and connections. So I'm enjoying my reading experience, but I don't think this is going to be my favorite book in the series. So far, I would say I definitely liked book 1 better because I enjoyed the character dynamics and character relationships a lot better. I feel like Bryce and Hunt in this book, there's a lot more of them like having sex and like being together physically. But because they have so much else going on in their lives and so much else that they're sort of having to deal with and pursuing, there is a lot less of them just like hanging out and talking and bantering and doing stuff together for fun. And I kind of miss that. So anyway, those are my feelings so far. I will check back in and probably I'm gonna finish the book today. My god, okay, I just like, because I just like yelled out loud and laughed, I had to like get on here and document this. I'm reading chapter 60, okay? And then I'll update you on my notes on other things, but Celestina and Hypaxia, what? Did not see that one coming at all. Okay. Like, whoo, okay, yeah, did not see that one coming. Also, like, I gotta say, props to Sarah J Maas for having, like, 2 sapphic couples in this world. I am so happy to see this be so much less heteronormative, like, well done. That was a twist, too, because, like, you don't expect it from her, I think. So I was like, oh, okay. So that was really interesting. So I think I'm wrong. And, like, based on other things that just happened in here, I think I'm wrong about who Day was. I thought that maybe Celestina was Day, but now I'm thinking it's probably the Hind is what it looks like. It's probably the Hind, which is interesting because she's also Hypaxia's sister. Not that they really know each other because they have different fathers and were raised separately, but that drama is totally something Sarah J Maas would do. I mean, like, let's have somebody betrothed. Because, right, Rune is falling for Day, who is the Hind, who is sisters with Hypaxia, who Rune is betrothed to, but Hypaxia is lovers with Celestia, who's been forcibly mated with Ephraim. So, like, it's a whole big mess. Yeah, I love it. It's great. It's like, that was good. That was a good reveal. That was a good unexpected reveal. I appreciate it. Okay, what else did I want to say? There is this idea floating around that maybe the River Queen is wanting a necromancer to reanimate Sophie and turn her into a soulless weapon, even though she's dead. Who could that be? Well, Hypaxia comes from a line of witches who have necromantic abilities. I don't know that she would be involved in something like that, but like that's interesting. I don't know like where that plot line is gonna go. I guess we'll see. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier was this whole thing of Danica researching her family lineage. And we know that the shifters, the wolves, used to be able to attack the Asteri, but allowed some kind of a change when the Asteri took over because they did some bad things. We don't know a lot of details, but like there's some interesting history there. So I don't know what all of that is, but it's interesting. We also have found out that dragonfire is one of the only things that can harm princes of hell. So we've got Ariadne, who is now a dragon who's escaped. We don't know where she's gone off to, but she's probably going to end up being important because ultimately I'm guessing this is going to lead to some kind of a battle with the princes of hell. And if she has dragonfire, she might be one of the only people who they could use to fight against them. I also love the fact that Bryce found a place for Emil. He's now going to be named Cooper, and he's been adopted by Bryce's parents. And I just love that. I love that Bryce is the kind of person who thinks about this and wants to take care of the children. It's great. And then we have this whole thing of Bryce forcibly becoming a Fey princess because she had used her dad's last name and her identity as a Fey princess to get some things done, and he took that as an opportunity to legally make her a Fey princess, which she's pissed about. Like, it was kind of, honestly, kind of dumb of her not to expect that he would do something like this. Like, kind of dumb, honestly. But part of the problem is if she is a Fey princess, she no longer really has legal rights. He can force her to marry whoever he wants and is insisting on her continuing her betrothal to Cormac, even though she's officially mates with Hunt. So I love the fact that she kind of went along with it until they went to this masked ball where publicly she stated that she was mated with Hunt, and it was formally recognized by the angels and the Asteri, so her dad can't do a single thing about it. So go Bryce, we love it. Were you dumb for using his name? Yes, but hey, at least you kind of got out of some of it, so we'll see what happens next. Whew. That moment where like Bryce and Hunt are looking for a place to hook up at the masked ball and there's a locked room and Hunt forces his way in, and okay, we've got Celestina and Hypaxia together in there. I was like, oh. Anyway, had to update y'all. Probably I won't do another update until I get to the end of the book. I'm gonna finish my makeup while I listen. I have like a little less than 2 hours left at the speed I'm listening to, so We'll see. But if something big happens, I might check back in. Okay, we have lots more things happening. This book is just a bundle of surprises and twists and turns, so let's talk about it. And then I am headed out to do some errands and grab some lunch, so I'll take you along with me. And I will probably finish the book pretty soon. This is gonna be such a long video. Okay, so there's been a lot of sex in this book, much more than book one. I'm not really surprised. We kind of knew that was coming, so there's been quite a bit of it. I do find it entertaining, the teleporting every time they like orgasm together now that they're mates. It's kind of funny. They teleport to like random places. Like it works for me as humor. We found out that Adis, the Prince of the Pit, the one who looks like a cat, was the lover of Queen Thea, a Fey queen, like back in the day. So they were apparently allied against the Asteri. History has been changed. There's a lot we don't know. Again, not super surprising that there are things that are being told differently now, given the Asteri sort of rewriting history. But I will say thematically, I think it's kind of interesting that this book is exploring this idea of the victors writing history in a way that serves them. Because I think in the real world, that is also a thing that happens, and it's interesting to see that thematically drawn through the story. We've also learned a little bit more about Bryce's magic. She's kind of like a battery. She can like channel energy from other places and people and use it, but eventually it leaks out and she doesn't produce it on her own, or at least doesn't produce very much of it on her own, so that's kind of interesting. She doesn't have like unlimited power. She needs access to a source of power in order to fully be powerful, at least based on what we know at this point. And then the other big revelation is that the Hellhound was secretly Danica's mate. Danica is just full of secrets that she wasn't sharing with anybody, including Bryce, and this was a big one, that this person who supposedly should have been one of her enemies was actually secretly her mate, which explains why he's been trying to be helpful where he can be and why he's not like what Hunt remembers him being. Clearly being mated to Danica changed some things for him. And again, we're getting these references to the genealogy and history of both the Hellhounds, who are more like transform into dogs, and the wolf packs who transform into wolves, because there's some kind of a shared genealogical ancestry. There's something that's being hidden there. We don't totally know what it is yet, but hopefully we'll find out. So that's where we're at. I'm in the middle of chapter 65. A lot is going down. I'm not even like talking about everything. Like there is so much plot in this book and so many reveals in this book. Again, I'm gonna say I wish it gave us more time to breathe. I wish it gave the characters more time to breathe. That was one thing that I really enjoyed about my reread of House of Earth and Blood, and this book just is not giving us nearly as much of that, but a lot is happening and it is very action-packed and kind of a whirlwind. So I've got less than an hour and a half left to listen to. I will take you along with me. I've got to pick up a few things from the grocery store. I have also decided I'm gonna bite the bullet and get the Barnes & Noble edition of this book, because my Target one now isn't coming till March. And they do have different short stories at the end, so I'm just gonna go to Barnes & Noble and pick up a copy, because like, oh my goodness, I like March. Seriously, I would like to have a physical copy so that I can flip back and check over some of the things that I've noticed here, and it's annoying only having the audiobook. So we're gonna make that happen. I'll take you along with me. I'm gonna pick up some lunch on my way. It should be fun. Apparently all the Barnes & Nobles are completely sold out of all the exclusive Barnes & Noble editions. I guess the publisher must not have like made enough of them, and the Strand doesn't have it. I'm gonna try one other place and we'll see, but I am gonna pick this up. Who knew? Holy shit, I just finished. I gotta get my groceries home and then I'll touch base, but that ending, oh my God. What the hell? What the, whew. Okay, I'll be back shortly. Oh my God, okay, so I am home. And let's talk about the end of this book, because wow. Okay, in some ways I'm not super surprised. Throughout this video I've been saying there seem to be a lot of connections to the ACOTAR world, right? And I always thought that eventually Sarah would probably combine some of her worlds and like have more crossover stuff, but I did not expect it to happen at the end of this freaking book, having Bryce actually show up in that other world, meeting Reese, meeting Amryn, and I guess I'm wrong too, like Fury is not Amryn, however, they do look alike, so they're probably related in some way. So like there's clearly a reason for that. There's some like mirroring happening. The knife is from the world, the knife from the prophecy, and the sword like glowed there, like, oh my god, like what a freaking wild ride to end the book, having Bryce escape the Astari into another world that she thinks is hell, but it is not, and then meet these characters that we know from this other series. Speaking High Fae, which is a language apparently nobody had spoken there in 15,000 years, I guess since they'd been lured over by the Astari. So we'll get into all of that. I have notes on all the revelations, like, oh my gosh, the revelations are wild in this. Okay. First thing was we found out that the letters and numbers Sophie had written on her body had to do with how you access the Asteri archives. And so the plan is to somehow break into the Asteri archives and find out what's really happening. That's like the plan that they're plotting, right? We find out that that mystic wolf is in fact a Fendir, a secret Fendir heir. Is Sabine going to try to kill her? Did Sabine already know or suspect that she existed? Who knows? But we know Sabine wants power, so this is going to be a problem. And at the very, very last scene of the book, we see her open her eyes. Ethan goes to get her. She wakes up. So we now have a Fendir heir, like a legit heir, who could take over instead of Sabine. So that's like setting us up for book 3, right? Then we have this whole thing of Therion finally trying to cut ties with the River Queen, but in order to do it, he goes and basically sells himself to the Viper and has to drink her blood to be separated from the River Queen. So that's like a whole other thing that's like getting set up. So I guess like maybe his plot line of like working for the Viper is what we wanted to set up. I do think there was an overemphasis on Blue Court politics in this book. I don't think it was as interesting as other things, partly because I think the River Queen is never really fleshed out. Like she feels sort of vaguely villainous, but I don't think we know her or know her daughter enough as characters to care all that much. It just feels like it's this thing happening over there, not as clearly related to the rest of the plot. So that I think could have been done a little bit better. Before they go in to the Asteri compound, knowing it could be their last time doing anything, right? We have Rune saying he wants Bryce to be the new Fey Queen. He wants her to overthrow his father. He doesn't want to be king. He wants Bryce to be queen. Bryce doesn't want to be queen, but like the reluctant royal trope is real. So we all know how that's probably going to go eventually. And then they get into this compound, get behind the secret door, and what does she discover? Oh my god, the Asteri feed on First Light. Of course they do, and they're like aliens basically who've existed forever that go from world to world and prey on the life force of people, much like the, you know, the death god. They aren't actually stars in human form. They don't actually have stars in their chests. They just have all this power because they're sucking up all the power from all the people making the drop in the city. So that's interesting. So like they've been sold a lie. And then the fact that they took this world, which I think is probably Earth, that they allowed a few humans to survive, but mostly used it as a place for luring other beings, Fey Shifters, and we learned that the Shifters are actually a different kind of Fey from a different world, which you know means that probably the Shifter Fey are related to Throne of Glass Fey, right? Because we have one kind of Fey in the Akatar world and we have another kind of Fey in the Throne of Glass world. So like clearly we are being set up for something that is going to link up all 3 of these series in one giant plot. So that's really interesting. But the Shifters had their pointed ears bred out of them by the Asteri on purpose because they wanted to create tension between these 2 kinds of Fey. But they're basically farming them for their power and energy, and that's how they're surviving. And there's all this history of like the queen who fell in love with the Hell dude, where they work together to try to shut the portals and cut off the Asteri from others from their original homeworld who do exist out in the world, and try to stop them, and it didn't work. And it turns out that Hell isn't really Hell, it's just another planet that figured out who the Asteri were and pushed them out, and then have tried to save other worlds from being consumed by them. So the Asteri are basically like colonizers. It's really interesting. They're like settler colonizers. Yeah, like the themes here are so interesting, except they lured other people in so that they could also feed on them and like essentially enslave them. Like, is this all sort of mirroring what happened in North America with like colonizers coming and like pushing out indigenous people, bringing African people over and enslaving them? Like, is that what we're mirroring here? Which, if that's the case, really fascinating. Yeah, there's a lot happening here. Like, I'm sure that some of Sarah's detractors are not going to like the way that she's necessarily handling all of these themes, but she's doing a lot here. I think you can see her definitely growing as a writer, growing in the things she's trying to handle and trying to tackle. Like, whether everybody thinks that she does the best job at it, whether you like her style of writing, you know, like, people are going to have different opinions on this, but I do think it's interesting. There is a lot more sophistication to the themes and the plots that she is exploring in her books than there ever used to be. And I am here for connecting series and worlds. Like, I live for that shit. So I'm kind of loving it. I'm very excited to see how and when we're going to get the Throne of Glass connection, because it seems like Bryce, right, is descended from the kind of Fae from the Akatar world, but Danica was descended from the kind of Fae in the Throne of Glass world. So there's a lot happening here, and I'm so curious to know where book 3 is going to take us and at what point she's going to bring together all of these worlds. Like, it's a little mind-blowing. Okay, one other thing that I forgot to mention is that we did get confirmation that the Hind was in fact Day. I guess I didn't mention it because I wasn't necessarily surprised. I figured after the masquerade thing that it was probably her, but we find out for sure. Now, Rune is shocked and horrified and wants nothing to do with her because she has blood on her hands, which honestly, like, dude, come on, get over yourself. Like, everybody here has blood on their hands. Like, really? Why? What is wrong? Anyway, I think it's kind of dumb that he's like so upset about it, but whatever, is what it is. So yes, we did also get that confirmation. That is the book. I have been unable to get a physical copy of it, unfortunately. Apparently all the Barnes & Nobles, including online, are completely sold out of the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. They can now order the regular edition. Like, what happened? And then the fact that Target has my thing on back order until like March. Yeah, there is one indie bookstore in my neighborhood that this morning had one copy of House of Sky and Breath on their shelves. It would be just like the regular edition. I don't know if they still have it. So I'm tempted, now that I've brought back the groceries and everything, because it was in a different part of the city than where I had gone for Barnes & Noble, I'm tempted to go by there and just see if they have a copy, because so freaking much happened in this book. I really would like a physical copy to reference and look at, especially because we're going to be doing a podcast episode for my podcast, Chapter 3 podcast. Me and Izzy from Happy For Now are going to be doing an episode on the first 2 Crescent City books, and I really would like to have a physical copy to be able to reference. So that may be what I do, go see if I can track one down somehow, because yeah, wow. But that was an ending, man. That was an ending. Okay, so overall thoughts. This is gonna be such a long video. Overall thoughts. I definitely enjoyed reading this book. I'm excited about what it's setting us up for. I feel like there's a lot of big twists and reveals and a lot of setup happening, where I'm so curious to see where future books in this series and in other series as well are going to go, given what just happened, because we just got a multiverse. I mean, gosh, it's kind of funny too, right? Because we're in this time, for those of you who follow the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like we're in this time where the MCU is entering the multiverse and we're getting like all of these connections. Meanwhile, Sarah J Maas is also giving us this like multiversal approach to like fantasy worlds and the Fae and stuff, and I am here for it. This was much sexier than book 1 in the series. I think going forward her books are generally going to be pretty sexy, and I'm not mad about it. I'm not upset about it. I think she is wanting to write for an adult audience, wanting to write different kinds of books than she had previously. As I said, I do think thematically there's a lot more sophistication to what she's exploring in these books, and I'm really enjoying that element of it. I do think that House of Sky and Breath didn't give me as much of what I wanted emotionally. I think the emotional piece of these characters' relationships with each other and how they're feeling about things, we didn't get to see as much of it as we have in her other books, especially her last 2 most recent books. And I think it's because there was so much plot and so much action that it kind of edged out those things. And I do think this book is shorter than House of Earth and Blood, so I wonder a bit if people have been pushing her to shorten her books because they do tend to be really long. But I almost wish we had gotten a slightly longer book. I would have been fine with it if it had given the characters more room to sort of breathe and feel, like be in their emotions. And maybe on a reread, I would feel differently about it. Maybe I would pick up on more of it because there was just so much to process on a first time reading this book, but it definitely didn't hit me emotionally in the same ways that some of her other books have. That said, I liked a lot about it. I like a lot of what she's doing. I think there's some interesting plot threads happening. There's some interesting connections happening. I love the fact that we're getting multiple queer relationships. I love the fact that we're getting more characters of color. I also love the fact that she did what I was hoping for, which is fairly quickly we knew that Bryce and Hunt were going to be endgame. She didn't try to make some other totally different thing happen. And instead, what we're going to get is them being separated because Bryce is now literally in another world and they cannot be together because of those reasons, which I definitely prefer as a catalyst for creating that kind of tension in a romantic relationship, as opposed to introducing another love interest. I mean, sometimes that can work, but like it's nice to see her do something a little bit different in this case. So I really liked it. So not my favorite book from her. I would say that my top 3 books from Sarah at this point, and this is not necessarily in order, but House of Earth and Blood, A Court of Silver Flames, and Tower of Dawn are personally my 3 favorites from her. I think her strongest books and the ones that I've been most invested in. I would say that this is maybe my next favorite of the books that I've read from her. I'd have to think a little bit about it. I'm not 100% sure, but it's probably in my top 5. So I like it. Not a new favorite. Didn't love it completely, but I do think it's a really strong book. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it because it is so fast-paced and action-packed, and there's so many big revelations of what's happening. Oh my God. Like, I cannot wait to see, like, I mean, we're gonna have to wait forever. Like, it's gonna be so long before we're gonna get anything new, but I can't wait to see where she takes us next in either of these worlds, because there is so much room to play, and I'm excited. I think it's gonna be really fun. So definitely enjoyed this one. I think in terms of a rating, this is probably gonna be like a 4.5 star for me. I don't think it quite hits the 5-star mark. I feel like some of those things where I didn't get as much of the emotion from the characters as I wanted, or as much of that breathing room, it's gonna knock it down a little bit for me from a 5-star, but it's still a 4.5 star. I think it's still a really strong book, even if it's not in my top few favorites. So those are my thoughts on House of Sky and Breath. Super spoilery vlog. I hope you enjoyed this. This is gonna be such a long video to edit because I've already looked at like my footage and I have so much, but this was really fun. I enjoyed talking about it. I feel like there's always so much to talk about in her books, and this one surprised me in the level of complexity, the number of characters. Like, there are a lot of moving pieces here. I would love to hear from you if you've read this. hopefully, I mean, unless you're just not planning on reading them at all, like I hope you've read it if you've like watched this far into the video, but I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Talk to me, let me know any of your thoughts or feelings about what I talked about in the video, about the book. What did you think? How did you feel? Did you agree with me or disagree on different points? Did you have different guesses about things than I did going in? Let me know any of your thoughts that you'd like to share in the comments down below. If you guys like this video, it does help if you give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.